Hello! So, today, as per request on the forums, I will be going over briefly how to model a human character, and for this one, I will be using Officer Jenny. With any model, I highly recommend that you use a background image in Blender like I have here, but keep in mind it will only display in orthographic views, so as soon as you enter any perspective views, it won't show up. So it'll only show up when you're in like 1, 3, or 7 view. So since this is a front view, I'm going to be working from the front view. So yeah, keep in mind I'm not a complete human modeling is not a strong point for me, but I need practice, so. So I need to realign my background image, and this is one I just got off Google, and to put it in Blender, all you have to do is drag and drop it from your folder into the Blender window, and it'll show up here. But now we need to move it so it's centered over our axis. So you do that by hitting N to open this panel, and you can just drag the values over until you get it about right. I think that's good for me. And it's great when you find something like this because you should always use a reference image, even if it's not perfectly front or side view, to get the proportions correct. But it's even better when you find a perfect front view because then you can just work from that. So I'm going to add a circle here, and I'm going to make it 12. On average you would want to make it 8, but I found 12 is slightly more useful because of the way you're going to do the legs later on. So enter into edit mode and you have your circle. You're going to move it up to the waistline. I like to work from the waist. Let's scale it down to match. So one thing you need to do when you're working with 12 is you need to take these vertices and move them more inwards because we're going to be using those for the legs. So just move them about so they look like they match up, and then adjust these so that they round off a little bit there. There. So since we're working on the waist, we'll go right down to the legs. And from the image you can see that her legs meet right around here. So we're going to put this edge loop about here. I'm going to scale it to match. And now here's where we do the legs. So what we do to make the legs is we're going to... Oh, and you'll notice I'm not working in mirror mode right now, and that's because when you scale a circle across a mirror, it doesn't scale evenly across the x-axis. So what I like to do is I like to get my torso blocked out before I turn on mirror mode. So we're going to create a face there and create a face there. And then we're going to add an edge loop. We're going to add 2 edge loops. So one here, one here. And then we're going to pull these down. And so now we have, like, crotch, I guess. I'm going to make it like this way. And so now you want to pull these out, otherwise they're going to look really awkward and cause some bad pulling. Let's add another one in the middle. Okay, and we're going to leave that for now until we get back to, we're going to get back to finishing the leg later once we start mirroring. Alright. Looks like I have some doubles here. Just remove those. So we're going to actually put this down here because it's causing some weird edge loop problems, so just go down here. And then we'll just extrude back up. I'm not going over all of the hotkeys that I'm using because I'm going to assume that people looking at this will be using Max or Maya, not necessarily Blender, so... And plus I'm assuming that Blender users can find this elsewhere and it'll be explained better than I can do it, so... So now we're going to extrude up. And we're going to end right below the bust line here, because we're going to need some loops there to create her chest. We're going to go up and one for the chest. And then we need one for the armpit too. And you need to put one in the middle of her arms so that we can have nice round arms. And then we go up to the shoulders. You'll notice I'm not scaling it out to the edge of the shoulders here, and I shouldn't scale this out so far either. That's because when we extrude our arms, they're going to take up some of the space, and the shoulder isn't directly on the body. If you look at the human body, the rib cage goes back in, and then the shoulders come out on top of the rib cage. One for the base of the neck. And we'll scale up for the neck. Actually, I'm going to get rid of this and create a circle out of this so that we have even placement of our edge loops here, or of our vertices. And I will probably add more verts to this as we go on, but because this is just a skeleton for putting clothes over, I don't want to get too detailed on it yet, because we're going to have to add more loops for the shoulder pads and so on. So now let's go on to the legs, but first we have to turn on our mirror modifier. So I'm going to turn on clipping so that I can just adjust this here. There. So now the legs. So you have this, and it's kind of like a weird shape, so we're going to scale this in to try and make it a little bit closer to a circle. Of course, you're not going to get it perfect, but that's what the next extrusion is for. So we're going to extrude first here, and we're just going to scale it to 0 on the z-axis, and now it's like still a wonky shape, so we're going to actually make it a circle. And this menu set, the loop tools, is something you have to turn on in the Blender settings. I believe it's Control-Alt-U to open, and then it's in, sorry, it's on add-ons, I think, and you just search, yeah, so you need to turn it on here. So now we'll have this one here. This will be her, where it rounds her leg from being this squared shape to like actually a round leg shape. Now we're just going to continue following the contour of the drawing. And when you're doing this, I recommend that you follow one side of the drawing and try not to follow. You're not going to be able to match both sides of the drawing, so you should follow one side. That's just what I've found is more, it's easier if you do it that way. So I like to put one right above the knee, and then one in the middle of the knee, and then one right below the knee. And you can see from side view it's kind of looking weird right now, but we'll go back and fix that. And the feet, I always kind of struggle with the feet, but because I just really don't like doing feet. But this is what I will show you how I do my feet. So extrude down. This can also be applied to pretty much every Pokemon that you do. And then, so you extrude down, and that's going to be your foot height. So this is your ankle here, And then this is the base of the foot, so I probably want to get actually a bit longer because I think she wears heels. I'll extrude the heels later, actually. Okay, so then... No, if I want to do heels, I want to do it now. Sorry. So I'm going to scale this down for the heels. And then I'm going to extrude again and merge that new extrusion to the center so you close that up there. And then from here, we take, since I want heels, this part is going to be not extruded. I want to extrude this part here. This is so you can have a bulge in the heel, like this. So it's not just like flat. So now we're going to extrude these faces. And they need some serious reshaping. So you need to bring these ones down, and obviously the middle one up because the foot curves in that way. These ones you want to make sure they're level on the bottom, and you want to make sure that they're level with the heel because this is the foot, the bottom of the foot. And I'm actually going to make this smaller. And I'm going to extrude these once more. And just round out the shape of a shoe. So it looks good from side view, but from front view it still looks weird. So we need to widen the base here. And I think just widen this here. And I think the toe overall needs to just be wider. Maybe a little bit narrower. No wider. So now I need to bring these back and bring these back underneath and create this flat plane here. There we go. And I need to bring the heel, this part of the heel, down. So what we're trying to create here is this even slope here because that's how heels work. And I think I'm going to give her a flat heel because that's how I've seen most women's shoes. So there we go. Yeah. Okay, so now we need to flatten this out and make it more like the shape of a human body. Okay. It's close enough for now. So now we're gonna go and do the arms, and so we set up this edge loop earlier here. So we're going to extrude arms. And the first extrusion you make, you want to actually scale this up a little bit so you have some room. But the first extrusion you make, you're going to just scale it down and only extrude it a little bit and then make it a circle. And you're going to have to move it, probably rotate it and scale it. I actually like to keep it flat on the x-axis because it makes modeling the arm easier, and then you can rotate it to be a more natural pose. Okay, so see what I mean when I said earlier that we didn't want the elbow or the shoulder to be exactly flush with the drawing of the model, because this is exactly where the shoulder is starting now, and if we had it out here, the shoulder would be starting here. So now I'm going to follow this side because That's where her arm is going out, so we can get actually a accurate length of her arm. So I'm gonna go out to about here, and then her elbow starts here. Probably more accurately is about there. So you want to have loops around your joints. So like in the knee, I have the actual knee loop, and then one above and one below. You want to have some relatively close to the actual joint itself, because otherwise to encourage smooth bending when you actually animate. So the same with the elbow. This is the actual elbow loop, but we need two around it. And that doesn't mean you just add them arbitrarily. You can now shape them to help sculpt the arm shape. Okay, and I'm just going to estimate her forearm length here. Probably about there. Maybe a little shorter. Okay, I'm going to bring this down. And now, so I want to work on her shoulder a little bit. So this needs to scale up so that we have a shoulder here. And then I put in a loop here, and this creates the deltoid muscle here, and also gives you a nicer transition. Again, you have the loop around that. This is the actual shoulder loop, and then you have the ones around it to help encourage bending. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the head. And the head and the hands are my least favorite part of a human model, because they vary for each character, and you're actually going to have to do some planning ahead of time in order to get them correct. The hands are usually pretty much the same across all models, just different for different scenarios, so different for games versus high poly modeling versus sculpting, etc. But the head is definitely different for each character. Like, you would make an anime head differently than you would make a realistic character's head. So to start the head, I'm going to add a sphere. Oh no, sorry, I'm going to add a cube and a different object. And I'm going to add a subsurf modifier to it so that I get these soft or rounded edges. And that's going to give me the polygons that I need to work with. And I'm going to apply it. And I'm going to move this back to 0 so that they both have the same starting point, or pivot point. So you can see here I'm doing the same thing I did with the body. I'm modifying the larger scale items first, and then I'm going to remove half the model and go back and use my mirror modifier. Okay. So that gives me a pretty good silhouette of her face from the front. From the side you can see this is not really a good head shape. So basically we're going to start with just the front as her face, and then we'll build the back of her head later. So I set up here. Oops. I want to scale this more because this is going to be, because in animes their faces are relatively flat. So I'm going to scale this and move it back, and you'll see if you look in like perspective view, you kind of need to scale it up a little bit. So in general, faces come forward and then they're pretty flat in the front. So I want her face to come forward. So this outline here is pretty much the side of your face, and then it's going to come forward a little bit from that, but it's gonna, from here, it's gonna go back much farther. More dramatically, sorry. Okay, so now I'm gonna add in a loop here. So I need one for her nose, and I also need a loop for her mouth. And I probably would like to have a loop here for extra shape. And one here. And I would like, this is her brow line, but I need one also on her forehead, and I need one below it. So now we're going to start shaping this. So now basically you're just going to start, I'm not going to go over this step by step because basically you're just going to start shaping it into the shape of the head, and I'll come back after I've finished making the head shape. Okay, so you can see here I've started to shape the head. I moved some of the loops around basically once I started to get this general shape. I started making a few cuts and adding a few edge loops, and you can see here I've extruded the faces, these faces that were previously here to create the mouth, and then extruded once again to create lips. And I also previously extruded the mouth, or the nose, sorry, and then I merged them to a point so that I would have this little thing here. This little nose that sticks out like in the animes. So now I'm going to just continue reshaping the head. I want to make sure that my topology 1 stays nice, because obviously if you have shading problems in the face it's going to look weird. And 2, I want to make sure that I am staying true to the Officer Jenny face shape. So, yeah, so I need to create, I've actually got a pretty good shape right here right now. I'm going to move these in a little bit more to create like an eye socket. Even though they don't have eye sockets in the anime, it would be good to have them. And the eyes are going to be here, so I'm going to move this edge loop down. I do want to try and create a flat-ish plane for the eyes, otherwise they're going to warp and look strange. I think I'm going to extrude this down so I can have this plane, and then I can move these out and have a little bit more freedom with the surrounding verts. So this eye on this side of the drawing is much farther in than this one, which leads me to believe that the drawing was drawn at slightly of an angle. So I'm going to actually move this face inwards so that we don't have like a bulgy-eyed looking character. And I'm going to meet somewhere in between, not entirely over this eye, not entirely over this eye. And I'm just going to move the rest of the verts to adjust. And let me just double check, make sure that looks okay. I think I'm going to add an edge loop here at the top of the eye. Even though it's not going to be super noticeable, it will affect the shading. Just to round off the brow a bit. That looks much more natural. Okay, so now that we have the face pretty much done, we're going to finish the rest of the head. So, to do the rest of the head, we're going to do it pretty simply because we're going to be adding hair on the back of this, so we're going to pretty much be covering all of the topology back here anyway. So I'm going to extrude the top half of the head first because from right around the corner of the eye down to the jaw, we're going to be doing a slightly different technique to create topology for the chin that will meet to the neck well. So we're just going to extrude this back here. And like I said before, this goes back pretty dramatically. More than out, it goes back. So I'm just going to go back initially, and then we'll add a loop in here to make it more smooth if we need to. And actually, this is quite a large number of loops for the head, so I'm just going to go ahead and join a few of these. And again, this will be hidden by both a hat and... Actually, this can probably go... Because this is going to be hidden by a hat and also a little bit of bangs, we don't have to worry too much about good topology because it'll be hidden by stuff that actually has good topology. And again, it's not going to even be hidden, it'll probably be removed in the end anyway. So we're being very loose with this, just kind of making the shape of the head. So I want this to line up here, so see I have a quad now that I can make here, and then I'm going to make it so that this one lines up with this one so we can have another there, and one more there. And while this is not quite the most accurate shape for a head, it'll do for now because, like I said many times, we are just adding in shape so we can later define it, so we can have something to go off when we go to add the other parts later. So we're not flying in the dark. That's better. Okay. So now we're going to make the head meet the jaw, make the jaw, and also make it meet the neck. So if you'll remember, we have this 12 we have 12 vertices here, so we should keep that in mind when we're forming the hole for the neck, so that we can have a nice clean meet. And I often end up scaling down my head anyway, because I often find that when you model it one way, it looks way too big. And I think from the front view it looks okay, but from the side view something's not quite right. So we can get to tweaking that later. So I'm going to just scale or extrude back 1 for the jaw, or for the chin. So I want to make a chin that's like kind of defined here. And I want to make that new extrusion the new base, the new line at the chin. So I'm just moving these in so that that becomes the case. Just check, make sure nothing is strange. Okay. I'm going to make this a face here. I'm going to pull these out. And then basically you're just going to start to make this so it's an even flow here. And then, so how many, we have to check how many verts we have here. We have 10. So in fact, we could actually just scale this down into a circle, and then we would have our neck hole. So let's add a vert in here, and we can move this one forward. So now we have 11. And 11 is... oh, 11 on one side. My bad. That seemed like a lot to me. So we need to actually cut this down to 6 on one side. My mistake. Undo all that. So here we can come back with the jaw. Extrude this once more. And this time we're going to just merge some of these. This is not what you would want to do ever in high polygon modeling, but these are kind of tricks you can get away with in low poly modeling, because one, you need to conserve polygons, and also because typically you're not going to be doing anything with this after you're creating the base mesh that will cause rendering problems. Let's see. Now I have 7. Okay, so you can extrude this once, scale it, and so see, now we've created the base of our skull nicely, and I'm just gonna merge these two together. Merge those two together. Especially at the back of the head. Again, there's going to be hair. I'm not going to notice this problem here. I like to make a good base mesh for my humans first, then I can reuse them for other similar characters. And there you go. Now you have your neck hole. So now we're just going to join the two models together. So I want to join it to the body mesh, so I'm going to select the head mesh and then select the body mesh second, and then hit Ctrl J to join them. Oops. Enter weight paint mode. And so now I notice I have like some weird cube effect on the corner. I have a corner to my head here, so I'm just going to fix that and bring this in. Okay, and I actually do prefer it a little bit narrower in the back, because then it gives us room to model the hair around it and give it plenty of volume without messing up. So now we'll just delete this here, and then we'll select the two loops that we want to join to make the new neck, and then we're going to hit bridge. Oh, and it seems... Oh, it seems 7 would have been perfect. So let's go back and make the 7. Oops. And we can hit V to move these two apart like this, and then just create this into a face. And we'll use circle again just to evenly distribute that. Oops. Seems it doesn't want to, for some reason. So we'll just have to do it somewhat manually. Yeah, sometimes the circle tool breaks. I don't really know why. Okay, so that's pretty evenly distributed. And now we're just going to bridge again. Yay! And then we can just tweak them to better match our original neck piece. And there, now you have your head joined to your body. And so I think, personally, this head is way too large for this character. You would never... This would just look strange. Especially compared to the current style of the characters that we have, which is much more realistically shaped. So I'm just going to scale it down to like 2/3 of its current size. And see, this is what I said before, it doesn't scale evenly across the x-axis, so you just have to scoot it in a little bit. Maybe half the size. There, that looks much better. So basically now you want to go back and clean up the body a little bit. Basic knowledge of anatomy really helps here, because really all this is just following real human form and creating a character out of it. And even though this is resting pose, you don't want to create a character that looks off balanced, because it'll just be harder to animate later. So even though this is tweaking the pose of the character, it's actually much more useful for animating in the long run, because you'll actually have a character that is balanced and not like wobbly. I don't need these verts, so I'll just get them out of the way, save them account. And you want to constantly be going back into edit mode to check out how your model is starting to look. I personally like to stay in flat shaded mode because I think you can see the form a little bit better. So unlike the head where I was saying, oh, form doesn't matter too much here because it's going to be covered by clothes, the body actually does matter because even though it's going to be covered by clothes in this instance, it's going to be covered by fairly tight-fitting clothes. So we want to make sure that the form is pretty good. And in this case, most of the clothes can be painted directly onto the character model, while some other pieces like this little frill here and her pocket book and her sleeves will be modeled in, but a lot of it will be painted directly on, like this patterning on her vest and her belt. And I'm going to keep tweaking her form until I get it about right. I'm not going to show you every single step of that because it would take way too long, so I'll come back when I'm done with that. Okay, so I basically added in some more topology in the bust area specifically because I couldn't get it to look right without adding more. So I added a loop that ran up here, across here, and just meshed with the one that was already existing in the back. And it was useful because I also needed another loop up here in the upper shoulder area. So yeah, killed two birds with one stone, basically. So you can see now I have shaped my model. I've given her a good arch of her back on her spine area. I've worked on her legs, making them look more human-like. And yeah, so she's set up to render already with the settings I prefer. So let me just give her a render and let's see. Oh, flat shade still. Yeah, so you can see here that because we used good topology and we've paid close attention to the shapes, we've got good face shadow here. It's not awkward, and we've got a good shadow under her bust here. And we've got good shading on the legs area and under the feet and under the arms too. So that's pretty good. So now we need to make the hands. To make the hands, I will be modeling every finger. Basically, you want to extrude the end of the arm into, so now we're going to extrude it into the wrist, so this will be the wrist loop here, and we're going to basically make it the same scale as the loop that comes right before it. Or maybe scale it up a little bit, probably tweak that later. And in Pokemon they have 4 fingers each and a thumb. So now basically the idea is we are going to extrude now out into the hand, but the idea basically is we're going to create faces from this. Instead of just merging to a single vertex, we're going to create faces here, one here, one here, one here, but we're going to use those to make the hand. So in this case we need to divide it a little bit so that we can have 4 faces for 4 fingers. And I like to do this on the hand loop instead of on the wrist loop, just because I find it gives you slightly better blending, or yeah, shape blending when you are animating. So now we're just going to make them into faces. And now we're just going to even them out a little bit. You don't have to make them perfectly even because we'll be evening again. But you do want to make the make them somewhat symmetrical, so. Okay. So now we will extrude this again, and this is creating the palm of the hand. And so now we're going to make them, even. And you want to try to make them as squared as possible. But you also don't want to lose this oval shape because your hand, while is flat, relatively flat, you don't want to create it too flat because then it'll be kind of strange looking in the game. So we'll just push it a little bit. There. Now we're going to scale it along the Y to just make them a little bit rounder. And if you look at the top, it's actually taking kind of a hand shape, but maybe the palm is a little too long. Okay. So now we have our palm, and from each of these we're going to extrude a finger. So now instead of hitting just E, we're going to hit Alt-E, and then you're going to select individual faces. So now each of these is an individual face. And if we change this to individual origins, when we scale, it'll scale each of the individual faces instead of scaling it all together as one unit. The only downside is now we have to switch if we want to make it like move the fingers outward. So obviously they're all the same length right now, but we're just getting the fingers done, and then we will worry about the scale of each finger afterwards. So this is the joint of the middle, in the middle of your finger, and then this is the joint at the end of your finger. This is obviously the knuckle at your palm, and then this is the tip of your finger. And I like to extrude them and then just Alt-M, and then you can hit collapse and it'll make them all to points. So then now you have like rounded fingers, tips of fingers instead of little blocks. So now we'll just shape it. Again, we're modifying the resting pose slightly, but we're just giving it a more natural shape so that when it comes time to animate it, it's not quite so awkward. And so now we're going to modify the finger lengths. The ring finger and the index finger are about the same length for women, I believe. Now we'll just make them a little bit more slender. Now we can just tweak individual aspects about each of the fingers to give them the look that we are going for. So I just want them to be a little bit less cubey. Okay, so now we have our fingers. Now we need to make a thumb. So we're going to add in a loop in the middle of the hand, and we're just going to first adjust it to make it look natural. Okay, and now we're going to extrude the thumb from this face here. Yes. So I'm going to make this face a little bit taller, just so we have a little bit more room to work with the thumb here. And if you hold your thumb at a resting pose, you'll notice your thumb goes down. So actually I may extrude from this face also. I'm going to turn this, do circle on this so it's round. Again, creating in the knuckle structure. This is the knuckle that connects at the webbing of your thumb, and then this is the one at the tip. And then of course this loop here is where it actually connects to the palm of your hand. So just adjusting this so you get some webbing. And I'm just going to extrude the tip like we did here. And now adjust it for shape. And now I'm just going to adjust the rest of the hand to fit in. So you notice the palm of your hand dips inwards, so we're going to model that in here. So if you ever pick up your hand, if she ever picks up her hand, it'll be some nice shading, and it won't be just kind of awkwardly like a blob. And there you have it. I'm going to go over clothes and hair in another tutorial because I think this one's getting pretty long and my computer's lagging, so yeah, thanks for watching, guys. And you can use this model for pretty much any NPC you would want to use want to make because it's pretty standard. With a few tweaks it can become a wide variety of characters, so model on.